Hello. So thank you very much for coming to my presentation today on band resilience. So this is based on a session that I often work with bands and do at a time when they're facing financial crisis often. So it's great to be able to have a chance to come and talk to you today in a way that you're able to go and put some of these things into practice before it becomes an urgent need. So I feel after that brilliant presentation we've had this morning that I don't quite know how to follow that, but I hope that what this is going to do is give you some of those hints and tips and things that you can go and look at in order to take those first steps towards building a stronger and more resilient organisation. So the first thing I think it's worth talking about is what is the term resilience, or band resilience in this case. So I thought I'd start this presentation by going out and talking to various different members of different bands and things like that, and trying to find out what they thought we meant by the term band resilience. So starting with that, let's put up some of those ideas. So probably the biggest one that people came to me with was about how to be financially stable, and that probably will be most of what we talk about today. But there were other things as well. So people wanted to talk about an organisation that's moving towards a goal, being musically flexible. Now that's one that I found very interesting. It wasn't what I initially thought I might talk about in this presentation, but I think in the post-COVID world, people are going to have to be flexible in their approach to music making, and that might mean that their band, at least to begin with, starts with 15 or 16 players. And how do you work that into your band rehearsals? Are you able to choose music that can cope with 15 or 16 players? Do you need to have people playing slightly different parts to normal, or do you need to go and have a look at 6 or 10 piece music in order to work in the current climate? So effectively serving the community, and I think that is a big take-home message from Fred's talk this morning about working in the community. And you can see that a lot of what they do as a band is give to the community, and the things that they've been able to do since are a reflective effect of that. So by giving, they actually receive as well. So finally, encouraging and maintaining membership. So I think that's something that's particularly important at the moment. So how do you maintain your members' interest? And how do you either build membership or make sure that you're not losing membership at the moment, importantly. So after that, I came up with my definition of what band resilience means. So for today, my definition is a band with a defined purpose that is confidently striving towards it and has the creativity and ability to be flexible in its approach to that. Sound financial planning is in place, and it's able to withstand the unexpected. And I think everybody will agree that this year has certainly been one that's unexpected. So, the aims of today's presentation: I'd like to inspire bands to have a long-term financial plan, to be open to change, and I guess slightly linked to that, to challenge the view that the way you've always done something is the way to do it. Is there a better way? And maybe there's a chance now to stand back and have some blue sky thinking. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the different membership models that bands use. Now, the one that I think most people will be aware of, as it's probably the traditional model that bands use, is the free-to-play model. Now, this is where people access your services because you are providing a service as a band for free. Now, that can result in people undervaluing what you're providing them and not giving you the credit that you deserve for the services that you're providing. But what it does offer is a way of increasing participation for those that couldn't otherwise afford it, and that there's a fine balance there between making sure that what you do is as accessible as possible, but that people value it. And the answer might be somewhere between all of these different membership models. The final thing that is worth saying about the free-to-play model is it can lead to underinvestment in your facilities and your equipment. And I think sometimes bands do suffer from that underinvestment, where once upon a time they might have been in a better position to receive sponsorship, which is just not there at the moment in our society. The next one is the pay-to-play model. Now, this is where members pay subs or subscription fees, And what it does do is it gives the band a really plannable and regular income. So you can look at the number of members you've got in a year and then be able to plan your finances accordingly. And being able to plan means it's much easier for you to be able to know when it's appropriate to spend money, which can be a real challenge if you don't know what's coming. And it allows you to invest in those facilities. Now, I'm well aware that there's probably not a brass band in the world that fits exactly into one of these models, and it might be that you've got a half and half, and we'll talk about how that might work a bit later on. And finally, the next membership model is the paid to play. Now, this is one that's almost disappeared from banding completely, and it's where members receive an income or a payment for playing in your band. And really, it's an impossible model without significant external income from the band, either via sponsorship. So it's certainly, these days, a very, very rare membership model, but it's worth being aware of it. So what else do we want to kind of lay out at the start of this? A really important thing for your organisation to do is know what the purpose of your organisation is. And the reason for that is that it's much better for a band to measure success against a purpose than it is against some other measures that we might use as a band. And I'll go through why that is in a moment. But being able to measure success allows you to know if you're heading in the right direction, and knowing a strong purpose also allows you to bring your membership with you. So if you have a very strong purpose and everybody's signed up to it, it helps you make sure that your brass band is a team, because at the end of the day, you are working as a team. And then it's important to then look at what will that membership model mean in relation to your purpose, and will that impact what you choose to do. So a couple of examples. First of all, we've got the example of a high-ranking contesting band. Now, this is a band that would be aiming to make sure that they are achieving successfully in contests, but what they might expect from their members is either travelling large distances to make sure that they're at rehearsals, and they expect a certain quality of player. They might expect people to have done a certain amount of preparation and rehearsal, and because of those expectations, there's a different expectation in what the person gives to the band. So they may be giving more time and more energy or more of their own money in things like travel, and therefore a free-to-play model is what works for that band. But you need to make sure that you've balanced that. So how does that band measure success? Well, for them, it's going to be looking at contest results. At the end of the year, are their results where they expect to be? Are they happy with those results? And if they're not, what changes need to be made in order to achieve that measure of success? But what about another group? So our next example is a band that's invested in their local community. We've had a great example of that from Amersham Band earlier today. Now, they're going to be looking for something very differently. They're going to measure their success, whether people are engaged in the band, are they growing their youth band, do they have a strong local audience? Now, again, what they're then expecting from players might be very different. They're going to be wanting to make sure that their players come from a local area, that they are part of the community that they want to be part of. They want to make sure that they're playing at those local civic events and to have that local presence. And what that might mean is that they're not able to earn in the same way either through concert income or in prize money from contests. So they're going to need to look differently at how they cover their costs, and that might mean they need to make sure that their members are paying subs in some way, shape or form. So we're going to now look at some of the ways to think about finances. Now, I'm well aware that no band in the world will fit exactly into these pie charts, but they're an indicative way of thinking about it. So before we look at income, it's worth thinking about spending. Now, when I talk to bands on these sessions, I encourage them to really think about spending and split them into two categories. Required spending, and that's things that you have to spend every year, come rain or shine, and it's going to cover things like your rent or your building costs, your gas and electric, but also things like your conductor and coach travel if that's something that your band really needs to have. And then the other half is non-core spending. Now, these are things that might be important to your band, but you don't necessarily need every year. maybe buying instruments or uniforms, but also it's the extra things that might be the things that make your band interesting and exciting to your members, but aren't the things that in a time of crisis like we are now, the absolute minimum that you need to provide to be a brass band at the end of the day. So by making sure that you understand where those things fit together, you can then start to look and plan your income. And the big message from this is having a plan is really, really important, because then you can have targets and you can measure yourself against them. And again, that's something else that you can then measure success with. So looking at income. Now, you'll notice now that the pie charts have obvious colour matches. So when you look at the right-hand side, we're now talking about member-generated income matching that of your required spending. And the reason that we talk about that is that it allows you to really explain to your members what is the cost of their membership. So member-generated income, that means subs or other income that those players are bringing into the band. You'll also see that we've got band committee-generated income and concert income. And when I talked about perhaps having a blend of membership models before, that's where you might be able to move some of your band committee-generated income into the income that's covering your required spending in order to discount your membership. But being able to know the real term cost of your band's membership allows you to explain that to the members. So you could say at your AGM, the real cost of your membership is X amount of money per year, but we charge you Y at a slightly reduced rate. And that's because we've been able to earn this either through our concert income or other things. But it's a good way to think about it, that your core costs are going to always be covered from within, and being able to manage that means that you can then invest other money that you earn into the band in the future. So looking at the other half, band committee generated and concert income. Now, I call it band committee generated, not because I'm expecting the committee to put their hand in their pockets, but it's about the activities that they organise in order to earn money. And that might be a band raffle at concerts, or it might be that you decide you're going to host a band fete and you earn money not just through the band playing, but that your percussion section run a splatter rat stall, or the horn section are in charge of the lucky dip. So those sort of other ways that you might earn money in order to either offset some of your member costs or to then earn that money that you're able to invest in your non-core spending. Next up, we've got funding bodies to offer grants. And really, you should be targeting about 15% of your income for that in any given year. And again, I'm aware that you're not going to get that every year, but this should be a target that you have over as an average. So if you do have a large grant come in one year, you might not get so much the next year. But being able to see that as roughly 15% of your income is a really good target. And again, once you've got a target, you can aim for it. So how do you aim for it? You need to make sure somebody on the committee is looking at grants, and that might be local grants or national grants. But it's also worth thinking about who is the best person for that application process. I think we've all been in a position where the treasurer in a brass band is often the person in the band who happens to be an accountant. And it's not always an accountant who is the best person to write a grant application. The best person is probably the person that's got a English literature degree or something like that and has experience of writing in that kind of creative way in order to explain what you're trying to do. So make sure your committee does have a grant writing person, whether that's a role on its own or as part of another role. Make sure you've got somebody that's really looking at grants. And then finally, donations. And donations, it's hard, especially since the financial crisis, for organisations to get large donations, but it's possible. And that may be that just at the end of every concert, there's an envelope on people's chairs that says, if you'd like to make a donation, put it in here, and they can fill it out as a gift aid form. But making sure that you're targeting those donations as well it should be part of the makeup of your income streams. There are other ways of earning money, and they're all part of the mix, but this is a good way to think about it in terms of how you match funds from what your members generate to required spending. And finally, a reason for this is that if you go to grant funding bodies, they're often going to ask, well, if your members aren't putting anything into this organisation, why should we fund you? And if you're able to then say, look, we have our subs income, we use it for this, you're in a much better position to explain why people should invest in you through their grants and funds. So, finally, this is a really important take-home message. If capital spending isn't accounted for, you haven't broken even in a year. So what that means is that you should have a large and long-term plan for what you're going to need to spend money on, and making sure that you're chipping away at that over time. And when I run what we call our band triage sessions for bands, it's often because the band is already in crisis. They suddenly discover they need to spend a lot of money on something and they need it yesterday. And how do you get into that position? Well, it's because you haven't planned and you haven't been knowing it's coming. So an example of that is if you own a band room or a building, you probably know that every 40 years or so you're going to have to spend £30,000 on a new roof. Now, if you work that out, that's £750 per year, and that's a much more manageable target than suddenly finding that you've got a leak and the roof is shot and you need to spend £30,000, because it's much easier to find £750 each year than suddenly find 30,000. But in that, you should also know that every 30 years, you're probably going to need to buy a new tuba, or certainly 1/4 of a tuba, because you'll also need them. Each tuba's only going to have a roughly 30-year lifespan. So making sure that you've also put a bit aside for that tuba or a bit for the next cornet. So you should have that long-term plan, knowing that in year 1 we're going to buy a cornet, in year 2 we're going to buy a tenor horn, in year 4 we're going to need a new roof on the band room. And that way you can build up your reserves in order to be able to buy those things at the point that you need them through that plan. So I'm going to go to some questions. I don't know if we've had any coming online before we finish this section. So I think Sarah's going to come and join me to pose those questions that you may have been asking online. So Sarah, have we got anything?
Yes, we do. We have. Please do putting your questions in, because we've got plenty of time to answer them in this session. But we have had some through already. So first of all, Parky, do you have a feel for the average level of subs that bands pay across the country?
No, actually, we don't have a survey or anything like that really tells us what bands are charging. We do find that there's a discrepancy between the north and the south of England, where bands down south much more regularly will have subs, and we do find that those bands are much more able to plan their finances as a result. And I'm well aware that there's a historical precedent towards that, and it's a legacy of how bands were funded in the past. And it really, again, does depend on the area. It often depends on the section as well. You might find that often bands that are higher achievers, for want of a better phrase, on the contest stage, try and attract players by not having membership fees, and work like that. I think if I had to lick my finger and sense the wind, a common amount would be something like £20 a month for bands, probably more so in the south, with a little bit less up north. But that's an indicative amount. But really, that's why I say look at your finances, work out what your required spending is, and balance that against the subs, because you've got to bring your membership with you when if you decide to introduce subs, or when you're setting your subs. Being able to tell your members why you're asking for that amount of money and what that represents is how you bring a membership with you. And bringing your players and your team together is part of the challenge of running a brass band.
Yeah, I think to follow on from that, another relevant question is, have you ever worked through the process of moving a band from having no subs to paying subs, and how did the band find that process? Yeah,
so I have experience of a band that introduced subs for the first time. And it is a challenge, and that's why I say the thing that's really important is explaining to people why that's needed. Now, the band that I was involved in, they only brought in subs of £1 per week, so roughly £52 a year. I think it was £50 for an annual figure. And trying to explain to people just to introduce that tiny little amount was a challenge, because people have been brought up having never paid anything into their brass banding, and the band needed to understand that either there were costs of conductors or rent increase that just needed to bring a little bit more into the band, because the band were happy with their level of concerts that they were doing, and that had then a defined income, and almost everyone paid quite quickly, but there were some that struggled, and the band found ways of mitigating that. So it wasn't a blanket everybody must pay from now. They did talk to people about individual circumstances, people that were perhaps on benefits or from lower incomes, or had other challenges in paying that kind of amount. But introducing it slowly and building up was also part of that plan.
Brill. And a final one for now, we'll come back to some more questions a little bit later on, is Brass Bands England intending on doing any more workshops or seminars based on band resilience or financial planning or anything like that?
Yes, we will keep doing these sort of sessions, especially if you've got questions or things that you'd like us to workshop with you. Let us know, because we'll put on workshops that you want to hear from us. So keeping us informed of that is part of that as well. Now, the other thing that we do is I regularly meet with bands who ask to come and have a session one-to-one, to have an external person just help them with some blue sky thinking. So if that's something that will appeal to you, again, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.
Brill.
Thank you, Sarah. So to carry on to the next section, I want you to ask yourself, do you know what your purpose is? And do your members know what that purpose is? And I think that's part of the way that you need to work it out. Have a conversation with your members. And the example that I often use is, if there is a band that perhaps they call themselves the Sladeburn Band, their purpose is to meet up once a week, play through Sladeburn, and then all go for a drink together. That's fine, and it will work as long as everyone is buying into that. As soon as somebody comes along and says, I want to play Ravenswood, you then are into the point where you're starting to introduce conflict within the band, and that conflict can be one of the things that creates upsets, or as we often call it, band politics. So knowing what your purpose is helps you all to be striving towards the same goal. Do you know what you want the band to look like in 5 years? What's your long-term plan? Do you have a capital plan of how to get there? And what steps are being put in place to make that happen? And if you think back to what we heard this morning, the band had decided to go and build a band room. So those early steps were, how do we bring our team on board with this? How do we create a small team that are going to be the driving force behind it? How are we going to raise the funds? And they started to put people in place who were going to buy into that project and take it to its end point where we are now. So putting things in place now for where you want to be in 5 years is a really important thing to have. And your capital plan, in fact, might need to last for much longer than that. You might be looking at 30, 40, 50 years of spending so that you know what's coming up in the future. Next up, things to remember. People come to your band because it's what they enjoy doing. It's their hobby, it's the way they relax, or the way that they get excitement in that testosterone-fueled contest experience. But whatever they come to your band for, make sure you understand it, and make sure you're doing everything to think about that as an experience. What do the players look for when they're coming to your band, and are they getting the best that they can out of it? Are you investing in the right things, or are you just going through the motions? I think one of the most destructive things that when I ask a band committee why they do that, they answer with, oh, well, we've always done it that way. And sometimes that can be a really dangerous way of changing what people are expecting out of a modern brass band. And then finally, value your performances. So you should know as a band what it costs for you to go out and play a concert somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean every time somebody phones you up and they say, can you come and do a performance, you say that amount of money. But knowing what that cost is allows you to balance between, is it a concert that the members are going to really, really enjoy taking part in? Maybe the band are really well treated, they feel really welcomed, the audience are really receptive, and the band love doing it. In that case, it might be worth doing it for significantly less because your members are getting a great experience. But if it's a concert that, and I've done this session with a band before that once said they turn out for £50. And then I challenged them to say, well, is that a concert that people enjoy doing? And the answer was no. And the reality was that because they're not charging very much, they're not very valued by the organisers. So when they arrive, the things aren't in place. There's not a plan for what the band do when they arrive. And the band has stood around milling for long periods of time, not knowing what's going on, not enjoying it. And when you ask the band after the session, would you rather we didn't do that? And when everyone paid £2 into the band finances, the band turned around and said, we'd rather pay £2 into the band finances because we're not paying out petrol money and all these other things. So having an understanding of the value of your performance is really important, and it might give you a chance to reflect and balance what your concerts are, and why you go out and do them. So, next up, what do we need to do in a year of crisis? And I think we can all agree this is a year of crisis. First of all, have you been using up reserves? If you have been, you really need to take a step back and look at what cost-saving measures you could put in place. Are you going to be returning to your rented band room anytime soon that you're still having to pay rent out on? Or do you need to give notice and be looking at bigger spaces, because we are going to need to rehearse in larger spaces probably for the foreseeable future? So those sort of things really need to be thought about. Have you put the relevant cost saving in place to allow you to carry on, or allow you to restart activity in some way in the future? Make sure you talk to your membership. It's really important, and if you haven't previously had subs, it's going to be really, really difficult to introduce them at the moment if that's something you need to do. So you need to make sure that you're explaining to your membership why that might be something you need to do. And the same is true is if you have previously stopped collecting subs off people, you might need to have that conversation with the band and explain that whilst you're not able to rehearse, you do still need them to contribute to what the band are bringing in, especially if you're not able to earn through that particularly summer park income that bands rely on, and looking even further into the future into what effect is not having some performances at Christmas going to have. Do you need to go out perhaps and do more carolling? But the next question is, where might you be able to do that? Is it going to be allowed at all? And those are some of the difficult questions. So making sure that you're honest with your membership and bringing them with you, especially on a difficult subject like money, is really important. And continue to engage those membership. So if you're asking them to contribute, what are you giving them in return? Are you organising those band quizzes? Are you trying to organise small rehearsals when that's possible for those that want to do it? Those sort of things are going to become more and more important, that you keep your membership engaged. Is it time to consider registering as a charity? Now, many bands will be registered as charities, but there are also lots that aren't. We're aware from conversations that we have. Now, it's not imperative that every band does register as a charity. There are different membership models, but most bands will fall into the category of charitable, unincorporated organisation if you're not already incorporated in some way. Now, that means that if your turnover does go above £5,000, you are required to register. It also does offer you some protection. So, for example, if you're an unincorporated society or organisation, there are things you can't do, like you can't own property. So legally, somebody in your band is the legal owner of your instruments rather than a body that the band is. And that then has a knock-on effect to the people that are running your band, might be financially liable if it was to collapse. So you might want to look at it from that point of view. There's also the fact that if you're a charity, you can register for gift aid. Now that allows you to collect gift aid on, and in most cases, subs and all that income. So you actually get 25% extra on your sub money. You might be able to claim it on travel and allowances that you have, and as well on donations that most people know about. So it's I would say it's beholden on most organisations to be able to increase that income by 25% without having to do anything extra. So do spend some time thinking about that as something you might either need to do or want to do. And then make sure you're using this time to think about those changes that you can make. Try and build that enthusiasm. We heard from Fred this morning that bringing the band with them and being enthusiastic about the build was probably the most important thing that they could do, because without that team and that enthusiasm, it was never going to work. But also, listen to those new ideas. You might have brilliant ideas for your band, but also there might be somebody sat in your band that's got a fantastic blue sky idea but they don't know how to bring it to fruition. So talking to your membership about what they want to do, maybe they want to do a partnership with somebody, or they've got just something that they thought was so expensive that they probably thought it could never happen. But by talking about it, you might then be able to look at grants to do that. And what grants are a brilliant way of doing something that's exciting and interesting with your membership that you've actually not paid much money to do because somebody else has done it, and you're then enhancing what your members get out of that band experience and the service that you're offering them at the end of the day. So finally, we're stronger together. Look at those partnerships. Is there a local dance school down the road that is looking for a band to play at its outdoor performance that it's planning because it can't perform indoors at the moment? And a brass band might be ideal for that because it makes a big noise and it's used to playing outside. So go and look for those partnerships because, again, a bigger audience then is going to be much better shared than a small audience and an under-invested membership because they haven't enjoyed it in the same way. So this leads me on to my final, and this is our sort of big announcement of the day. We've been working with Crowdfunder, the website, and they've been running a series of campaigns throughout lockdown, and they want to work with us, and we want to work with them to have a fund set up, or sorry, not a fund, a campaign set up that's going to be called Save Our Brass Bands, and it's going to run in the run up to Christmas. But the difference on this campaign is that each band will be able to run their own campaign. So a few points about this. It's going to be a national celebrity-endorsed crowdfunding campaign where each band is able to put together their own little pot of money, and they get all of that. But by everyone doing it together, we're going to hopefully create a real buzz and a national conversation so that everybody can generate more than they would do on their own normally. So some other things. So we've formed this partnership with Crowdfunder to launch the Save Our Brass Band campaign. Now for this project, Crowdfunder have waived all of their fees so that you'll receive 100% of any donations. The only thing that will be on there is that they'll have a button at the end where they will say, if you'd like to tip Crowdfunder for our costs, that's okay, but you can put nothing in there as well. And Crowdfunder will be working with us on this, particularly on the marketing and having that national presence. Now, we have got our celebrity endorsement lined up, although I can't reveal it today, but it will be revealed very shortly, and it's a very exciting thing to have somebody with such a high profile supporting brass bands in this way, and we're very grateful for that. Now, this is open to all brass bands from all 4 nations in the UK, so wherever you are, you can get involved with this, and whether you're a member of BBE or not, this is for absolutely everyone, so that we're all better off at the end of it. And what happens is each band will run a mini campaign. So you might decide you need £1,000 to cover some of your losses during the summer, and you put on there that that's what you're raising funds for. You'll tell people about your band. You'll offer a few perks, but it's all about your band, and you'll go out and you'll engage your local networks. But then by everybody doing it at the same time, we'll also engage people on a national level who might come and find your band or be able to donate to a central pot that will then be distributed afterwards. So you'll be able to do that, and you receive 100% of that money yourselves directly. What we are able to offer is resources and advice with the Crowdfunder team. And the way that we're going to start this off, and this will run into Christmas, so it's going to run from mid-November until mid-December. As the main campaign, but to get started on October the 7th at 7 p.m, we're going to be running a webinar which you can sign up to now on the Brass Bands England website. If you click on events, completely free to sign up to that, and the Crowdfunder team are going to be there to give you some advice, some things that you can think about and how to start planning it, because a Crowdfunder campaign is most effective when it's planned and you're starting to do certain things in terms of engaging people in advance. So please do come and sign up to that. It's going to be really big as long as people buy into it, and I don't see why anyone wouldn't, because there's no cost to you, only a bit of time and enthusiasm. So I'm really excited to announce that today, because I think it's going to be a real game changer for bands and potentially generate a huge amount of money for bands in that crucial time around Christmas. So Sarah, have we got any questions at this point?
Yes, we
before
do.
Start?
So we've got a lot of comments generally about subs, about the process of getting started with paying subs, and a lot of questions around the similarities between sports, because obviously for lots of people that have been in sports clubs and that kind of thing, paying subs is standard really. So I've got a question from Stephen who says, do we have something to learn from sport about the way that they have their membership model? Is that something that we can look at and adopt?
Yeah, and I think that is exactly why sports are able to invest in their facilities and be able to do the things that they do. Now, sometimes sports clubs are much bigger than your average brass band. And I also think that's why the example of Amersham is going to be really important as we go forwards, where bands maybe need to think bigger. How are they part of a larger organisation? And having that scale. Now, that then feeds into everything. So I don't think Amersham Band have particularly high subs, but what they do have is the number of people paying those subs, so it adds up to a lot of money, and that all then contributes to those facilities that they're able to have. The other thing that then follows on from that is being able to have a bigger resource. So and when I say resource, I'm talking about your people, because every brass band is made up of the wonderful people that you all have working on your committees and doing all that work in the background. But if you want to build a leadership team like Amersham, it's much easier to find people with those particular skills that you're looking for when you're looking at a group of over 100 people compared to when you're looking at perhaps 25 people. So I think that scale of things as well is worth thinking about and looking at. And are you training people? Because the reality now of music education is that schools aren't going to be in the same position as they were perhaps 10 years ago in order to build players in the era of the music services. So bands do need to invest in those young people and how they're training them. So I think that's part of the equation as well. And how you introduce those subs, I do appreciate is a difficult thing to begin with, but I think we perhaps need to wake up to the reality that people pay for their hobbies at the moment, and that includes sports. And I think there's a real example there to take about sports.
Great. Another question from, I think, Stuart from the Sheffield Brass Network. You've mentioned the importance of creative grant writing. Is that something that BBE can assist with?
Yes. So if you are looking at grants, get in touch with us. Now, there are only 5 of us that work for Brass Bands England. So what we can't do is offer everyone that we'll write all your grants for you. I'd love to be in a position to do that, but we're not at the moment. But if you're writing grants, come and talk to us first. We might talk to you about the project, the ideas that you've got, how you're structuring things, and then we might point you towards one of several grants or grants bodies and say, go and apply for this one or that one. But before you actually submit the application, we'd then ask you to send back what you're planning on submitting so that we can have a look through it, and we'll be able to give you some advice. We may even be able to give you a letter of support for the project as long as we think it's going to be successful and meets the requirements of that granting body.
And another question on the subject of grants. Is there somewhere that you can look to find grants that you might be eligible for, maybe small community grants that are for your area, or arts-based project grants?
So as part of your membership of Brass Bands England, it does include membership of Making Music. So Making Music do have a brilliant resource which lists a lot of funds that are particularly aimed at music. Now, that they may be more about providing you with soloists for your concerts, but that's part of the process of grant writing. If you're going to have a soloist anyway, try and look for a grant for it, because the money then that you would have spent on that soloist can be put into other things that you're perhaps looking for funding but can't find a grant for. There are other ways. So locally, you might have a local office that looks for that. So if you're based in South Yorkshire, where we are, there's the South Yorkshire Funding Advice Bureau, and that's a service set up to help organisations in South of Yorkshire get access to those funds. And funding advice bureaus do exist in other parts of the country as well. So it's going out and looking for those. There are other sources, such as the Directory of Social Change, although that's quite an expensive way for bands to go and find those grants, because they're really tailored towards larger organisations. But again, that's something we're hoping to do more of in the future in order to support brass bands.
And a question from Martin: what are the financial benefits of registering as a charity?
So the immediate benefit is gift aid. So any charity that's a registered charity can get gift aid, and that means any of your donations and several other things like travel allowances can be gift aided back, and that means that you get 25% extra on that. There are also some funds that will only allow you to apply if you're a registered charity, and that's partly because their guidance says that they can only support organisations that are of a charitable nature, but they don't have the resources to vet everybody and check that they're a charity. So they are simply looking as, are you a charity that's registered with the Charities Commission, because that allows them to know that you've already been vetted.
And final question for now, what kind of projects can bands apply for from Arts Council England?
So the Arts Council project grant is really there for one-off projects. So that might be that you've got a concert coming up and you'd like to treat that like a project. So maybe you want to invest in having a video display that's going to go on, or some props to make the concert exciting, or some costumes, or a soloist, or anything else that is perhaps above and beyond what you would do as your sort of regular activity. So if you've got an idea for something, come and have a conversation with us, and we can help you build up to that. What it probably won't be able to support you with is those capital grants. And again, if you're looking for capital spending, what we recommend you do is look at where you can bring in funding for other things, perhaps things that you're already planning, and get funding through that you can then divert that funding that you'd already planned to spend on a soloist, as the example, into your capital fund. So that's a good way to think about it. But the Arts Council really, really want to support brass bands, and the new guidance from the Arts Council really highlights the importance of funding grassroots activity, and we hope that will be of great benefit to bands going forwards. Thank you, Sarah. So how can my committee be confident in taking my finances forward? Make sure you look at funding, so make sure you know where that help and support is available. At the start of lockdown, we did a crowdfunding campaign, which is the Brass Band Emergency Fund. So if you are in crisis at the moment, please come and talk to us, and you can email info@bbe.org.uk, and we'll send you the application form for that. We also have the Norman Jones Trust, which is a fund that we administer. Norman Jones was a past chairman of the British Federation, the predecessor to Brass Bands England, and we often work with people to use that to offer them the match funding they might need to apply to other sources. We also have our development webinars that you can go back, and they've been running since the start of lockdown, and you can go and watch those back now on Facebook. And then also, as we just mentioned, there's ACE project grants, the Arts Council England, for people to apply to, and come and talk to us about funding application support. We've also launched in lockdown our Brass for Brass competition. This is a monthly competition where each month we're giving away a free membership of Brass Bands England, as well as we've got some goodies for the individuals. So the amazing guys at Brass Pass TV that have been putting on the stream today, they've offered a monthly subscription for our winner, as well as there's a £25 voucher for band supplies, as well as the runner-up gets a subscription to British Bandsman magazine. So really thankful to all those partners that are involved in that. And the best thing about it is all you do each month is click on a link on the email, and that's it, you've entered. So once you've initially signed up, that's all you have to do. And for every month that you enter, you get an extra entry. So the second month that you enter, you've got twice as much chance of winning as you had the month before. So And if you do that collectively as a band, your band will have more chances of winning that membership, which, whilst it's not a huge amount of money, £100 in the reserves at the end of the year makes a big difference. And make sure you're looking for that government support. Many bands have been able to receive £10,000 during lockdown as part of the rate relief. There are other things as well, so make sure you keep an ear to the ground, and maybe that means that you just need to make sure you're in contact with your local MP just to make sure they're aware of you and what's going on. Next up, how do you build a stronger committee? So what can you do as a band to make sure your committee is functioning really well? One thing that we really, really recommend you do, we do it at BBE with our trustees, is we go on a committee visioning day or an away day. And that is really important, that you actually take away the day-to-day business of running your band and give yourselves that space to think about what you'd like the band to be, what's important, where do you want to be in the future. And also, how do you work as a team? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What sort of person might you need to add to your committee in order to mitigate those weaknesses? make sure you've got that long-term and short-term budgets. Now, I think we've all been in that position where a treasurer always says no. Whenever you ask them for funding, they say no. That often can be because they don't know whether that's something that they're able to spend money on. So if you've got a plan, it makes it easier for those treasurers to say yes and be able to provide those more exciting opportunities for your membership. And then also having that long-term plan that really allows you to plan what you're going to need to spend on capital over the long term. There's also training available for treasurers. So at the moment, the Directory of Social Change is offering some of that training online. So you can go and sign up for one of their courses and support your treasurer. Treasuring for a small organisation can be very different, even if you've got an accountant on your committee. They may be used to working in a very big organisation, and understanding how that works for a small organisation can pay dividends. My next advice is appoint a grant writing committee member. And now, again, that doesn't have to be your treasurer. My point earlier is a treasurer is an accountant. They've chosen to work with numbers. They might not be the best person in your committee for writing what is essentially a creative writing project in grant writing. You may decide actually what you need as a committee is a dedicated person who's appointed just to do grants, because it is a big job. I do appreciate that. And they're then able to coordinate that. They might ask the treasurer to write a paragraph on this bit, but then they're bringing together all those ideas in order to create great grant applications. So that's the end of my presentation today. I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody that helped in the preparation, the people that I talked to about what band resilience means, as well as my colleagues that have helped with various aspects. So on that note, I think we'll finish with any more questions that may have come in. Thank you very much.
Yes, we've just got one final question, which is, we've seen that there's been big announcements by Arts Council and the government about the emergency funding that has been available. What out of that money has gone to brass banding?
So that 1.57 billion is I think what you're referring to. Now that funding is really there to support people that are working in the arts industry. So a lot of it has gone to national organisations or people that are big employers or have very large overheads such as buildings and things like that. So not a huge amount of it will end up in the hands of brass bands directly, but part of that means that the pressures on the project grants is not going to be the same. So really the recommendation is in most cases for bands, please do go and apply to those project funds because that's been restarted in order to allow other funding to go elsewhere. Thank you very much.